Tens of thousands of cybersecurity professionals filled the Moscone Center in San Francisco Wednesday for Day 3 of the 2019 RSA Conference. The annual conference explores how companies and organizations are trying to stay ahead of cybersecurity threats. During the event, CBS News intelligence reporter Olivia Gazis sat down with National Security Agency Director General Paul Nakasone. They discussed how the NSA and U.S. Cyber Command are working to defend the nation in cyberspace. She asked him if foreign operations happening within the U.S. are a new normal.
Well, I think this is a new normal in terms of the way that people communicate, and certainly the way that our adversaries communicate. I think that what we have to do is we have to understand their techniques. I think that when we see, an ability for a nation to create personas and to create followers, any way that we can share information about that to ensure that social media companies are turning those folks off and closing those accounts, that's impactful. That's getting at the heart of the matter. That's showing success for us.
Olivia Gazis joins us now from San Francisco. Hi, Olivia. So what stood out to you most during your discussion with General Nakasone about Russian interference?
What stood out to me most about that particular part of the conversation was that he said, 2020 starts right now. They are very, very much actively combating these foreign influence campaigns that Russia and others are still carrying out. And one of his priorities before he came in to become the commander of U.S. Cyber Command and the director of the NSA was, he said, to change Russian behavior. And I asked him, why hasn't that behavior changed despite sanctions and other pushback by the U.S. government? He, of course, is the one behind the Russia Small Group, as it's called, this sort of cohort of cybercom and NSA operatives who carried out an offensive operation to shut down Russia's Internet Research Agency during the midterms. Reports about that recently came out, and he addressed it today. He didn't go into detail, but he said that those kind of forward-leaning operations are the kinds of things that we're going to have to expect and prepare for, because as we know from other intelligence officials who have warned us, adversaries of the United States are refining their capabilities for foreign influence campaigns. They're coming up with new ways to affect the conversations that we have in this country. And this is the man who's going to be in charge with combating all of them.
It's incredible. Far from backing down, they're just heating up the offense. So, Olivia, you also asked the general about Huawei. Does he believe the U.S. entities involved in the investigations have the right understanding of the threats?
Right. So it's hard to overstate how much concern there is within the U.S. government about the threat that Huawei poses, especially as we are all worldwide building out a 5G network. So I asked the general, especially as European partners like Germany and Great Britain, even Canada, have said, you know what, we're actually holding the door open. We may be able to mitigate some of the risks that Huawei poses. Of course, the consensus in the U.S. is that it is absolutely a national security risk. It is tied to the Chinese government. It provides information back to the Chinese government, and there's no way that we would allow Huawei components in our infrastructure. So, nevertheless, some of those allies are still open to the possibility. And what I think much of our government has been doing is saying, think twice, because we don't know if we can work with you if you, in fact, allow those components to enter your 5G build-out. And Nakasone was even more explicit today, because we have an intelligence sharing alliance with, it's called the Five Eyes Alliance, of which the Canadians and Great Britain are a part. And he said that he would have to reevaluate that alliance if, in fact, those countries open the door to Huawei.
Incredible. So they actually see this technology, this 5G technology, as almost a Trojan horse, that if you let it in, who knows what could happen?
Without question, yes.
All right, so sticking with China then, what did we learn today about the gap between the U.S. and China when it comes to investing in machine learning and artificial intelligence?
So while he wouldn't acknowledge that there is a gap, this is clearly a concern among a lot of the national security and intelligence entities within our government, because China is putting a lot of effort into developing precisely those things: AI, machine learning, quantum computing. And the U.S., while it is certainly got its own capabilities and research investments there, needs to make sure that it maintains some level of superiority. And so I think that he was insistent that we keep up that pace in order to be able to compete as the Chinese show themselves to be more sophisticated in these areas.
We got to invest in our education system to do that. All right. So, Olivia, you asked the general about his interactions with President Trump specifically. What did he say about that?
Well, I wanted to know from the general, obviously there's been some daylight between the president and some of the judgments that he's been handed by the intelligence community of late. We've seen the difference of views on North Korea and its strategic intentions to denuclearize. We've seen it with regard to what the president believes Russia actually did in 2016. We see it in who he believes is or isn't to blame for the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. And all of those things are, he's been delivered judgments by the intelligence community, and as is his prerogative, he's taken a different view. So I asked the general, how do you instruct your workforce to make sure that they continue delivering products that are based on judgment and not based on a perceived political opinion or political view from the White House? And he essentially said, look, they're professionals. I've been doing this a long time. They know what their job is, and they know how not to be buffeted by, political headwinds that may be blowing in their direction. I also asked him if he happened to talk with the president about the use of his personal cell phone. Some of those reports had come out earlier this year about, the president possibly compromising some security by opting to use his personal phone to have private conversations and having foreign adversaries gleefully eavesdropping on that. But the general deftly sidestepped that one, and he said, next question.
All right. Next question for you, Olivia. What other adversaries do the NSA and U.S. Cyber Command have on their radar, and how are they working to defend the nation? I'm sure this is a tireless job. It never stops, 24/7.
Without question. And there are so apart from Russia and China, we know that Iran is engaging in some malign activity in our networks. We know that North Korea was hacking even during there were reports that was hacking American businesses and government agencies even while the Hanoi summit between President Trump and Chairman Kim was taking place. But one also interesting thing, the administration, the president and other officials within the administration have declared ISIS to have been decimated, right? 100% territorial defeat or approaching that very soon. I asked the general if that's the same thing in cyberspace, because he was charged with leading what was called the Joint Task Force Ares, which was essentially enabling the NSA and Cybercom to engage in offensive measures against, ISIS propaganda and recruitment efforts online. And he said that battle is very much ongoing. He declined to give a percentage defeat, but he noted that there's still, ISIS in the Philippines, ISIS in Syria, ISIS in Iraq, that this is still a battle that they're going to have to dedicate resources to and pay a lot of attention to going forward.
Okay, Olivia, and one more quick question for you. How much of this conference do you think is monitored by foreign actors?
I would say that they're pretty highly attuned, especially when, the person who's among the 10 senior most commanders within the Defense Department and also the leader of the largest intelligence organization in the U.S. government. I'm pretty sure they're listening in.
Me too. All right, Olivia Gazis, thank you so much for that.
Thanks so much, Tanya.